Yes, they are.
This is John for JohnG'sBeat.com. I'm here at Wizard World. I got the hardest working man in comics, Victor Dandridge Jr. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good, man. Good to see you, you know?
Yes.
Good to be back. So why are you the hardest working man in comics?
Well, honestly, it's because there's nothing that I won't do for comics. You know, whether that's, make them, teach them, talk about them, with Comic Con culture, I'm the guy that's everywhere. You pick a corner, you'll find me in it. So with that in mind, hardest working man in comics. I'll traverse the floor more times than almost anybody.
I know, it's hard to get. I had to I had to plan this out weeks ahead of time just to get your time here. So as the hardest working man in comics,
yes.
You must be an expert on comics. But what is your favorite comic?
Ooh, my favorite comic, if I'm not too shallow, would always be my own, because you got to shill for yourself. If you don't shill for you, who you gonna do for? But I'm a fan of all kinds of comics, actually. So I'm not even just like a Marvel DC guy. It's Image, it's Aftershock, it's Boom Studios, it's everything. If it's a good comic, I'm a fan of it. So I love comics of all types. So I really couldn't even pare that down to an absolute favorite.
When did it start for you?
Oh my goodness, I was 10 years old, and I didn't like reading as a kid, but they announced on the news that Superman is going to die, and that changed everything. I wanted to read that because I love pop culture, and so how do you kill a character like Superman? I want to read that, and luckily, like, my parents were both really into whatever he wants to read, get it to him, and so that's how it started.
Now, like when we're young, we all draw, we all make our little comics. How do you go from that to, I'm really going to do this?
So what's really interesting is I have one of the most comic booky origin stories of all time. So like I said, I didn't like reading as a kid. I find out about the, Death of Superman. I want to read that. In getting into comics, I find out from my dad's side of the family, 3 of his brothers could draw, loved comics and everything. And so my first instances of wanting to draw and create comics or anything like that, I had my uncles that really were supportive of it. The youngest of them, my Uncle Mark, was the hugest supporter because he was like, when we grew up at a time in the 70s and everything, practical life mattered, right? So we're from Ohio, comics are made in New York. If we're not moving to New York, we can't make comics. And so he's like, you're going to figure it out. You're going to be the one to figure out how to do this because I can tell that you love it. Within a year, though, unfortunately, my uncle was a victim of violent crime. Oh. And I made a vow by candlelight, much like Batman, much in the same vein as Peter Parker, made this promise that in honor of my uncle, I would be something in the comic book industry. And that's been one of my guiding factors since.
Wow. So, yeah. You certainly are a force in the industry.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to... You love your own comics? Let's talk about it. Tell me a little bit, tell everybody a little about your comics.
So I have an imprint called Vantage and House Productions that we started in 2010. And one of the greatest success stories of comicdom that I know of is I'm this kid from Columbus, Ohio. I quit a cushy state job to make comics full time. And that has been my job for the last 11 years. So without working, regular 9 to 5 or, part-time this, that, and the other, the only things that I've done over the last 11 years are all comic book oriented, whether that's working for a convention, teaching comics in schools, making comics myself, that's been my thing. So Vantage In-House is my baby, and we have a number of award-winning, award-nominated titles, from the all-ages friendly Wonder Care Presents The Kindergardians that I do with Justin Castaneda. I can't say why, but keep an eye out on that book. It's going to be very important to a lot of people very soon. I also do a teen-friendly title called Origins Unknown with Jacob Newell, which is getting a sequel called Point of Authority, Family Ties that I'm doing with Adam Field. So working with a lot of different collaborators and creators is fantastic. Then there's a young adult title called The Trouble with Love that I did with Harold Edge, and it's getting a sequel called Never Too Late. We're actually working on that. We've got the 2nd issue out right now, so that's great building. And then of course my bestseller is the Samaritan series that I did with my brother Ren McKenzie. We came back earlier this year in celebration of 10 years of the Samaritan being out, released an 8th issue that I did with Jean-Paul Deschamps. Again, spreading my wings a little bit, working with different people, and really kind of getting a feel for what kind of stories I can tell. And then last but certainly not least is Oh Crazy and the 40 Ounces of Death. It's my love letter to Quentin Tarantino and Sam Jackson movies that I did with Brian Moss. So a lot of range of different stories. We try to tell as many different things as we can to appeal to as many different people as we can, because comics are for everybody. You just got to create the right ones.
Now, when you have an extra 2 minutes or so in your schedule, what do you like to do?
read comics, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
It's so true. It's one of those things where I just live in the comic space. I love geekdom. I love talking about it. So if there's anything that I can do, it's always about engaging in some way, shape, or form about comics, how they're made, talking about the business behind it, the creativity, seeing the artists, which ones I love, which ones I don't. I don't love every comic. That is absolute truth. I am critical, but it's with love and appreciation of the craft. So, it's never about being, poo-poo on people. I do a video review show called Black, White, and Red All Over. If you look at it on YouTube, go to comictown.tv, you'll see every week we're talking about comics, and our love for the medium shines through. So that's what it is. I love comics. I do.
Well, comics love you, and the comic universe loves you. I'll let you get. I know you got a bunch of panels going on. Before I let you go, any place you want to promote, website, Facebook, whatever?
Absolutely. Come find me at VantageInHouse.com. Find me on social media at VantageInHouse in all forms of social media. And also, if you want to make comics, and I can help you do so, check out YouCreateComics.com. That's the letter U, C-R-E, the number 8, comics.com. We've got programming and product lines to help you make your own comics from start to finish.
Victor, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your friendship. You're not only one of the hardest working guys, you're one of the coolest guys here, man.
Dude,
so
thank you very, very much.
Appreciate it.
Always.